So that the question is, why this particular kind of people are the targets of so much venomous hatred? And I think the answer is that they not only succeed, they succeed in a way which is the threat to the egos of other people. That is, you can envy a Rockefeller, but he's no threat to your ego, because you say, listen, anybody can be rich if he's born a Rockefeller. But the guy who comes here, let's say from Vietnam or Korea, and arrives here with little more than the clothes on his back and a few words of broken English, and a decade later he has his own little business, and you see his son a few years after that getting ready to go off to Harvard or MIT, you got to ask yourself, you either got to, you've got to hate yourself for saying, my God, I've been stagnating, this guy was nothing and now he's risen up, or you're going to have to hate him. And most people, when they have a choice between hating others and hating themselves, they hate others.
If history has shown us anything, it's that people do not always admire success, they resent it. The Jews have been hated for centuries, and if you look at the pattern, it has little to do with their religion, their culture, or even where they live. They have been expelled from countries where they were prominent capitalists and from places where they were poor laborers. They have been persecuted in times of economic hardship and in times of economic prosperity. If there were a consistent reason for their persecution, it should have changed based on circumstances, but it hasn't. And why? Because human nature hasn't changed. I have often said, when people are given the choice between hating themselves for their own failures or hating others for their success, they will hate others for their success. The Jews have time and again proven the second part of that equation. They arrive in new lands with nothing, and through careful habits, discipline, and economic ingenuity, they rise. And when they rise, so does resentment. It is one of the great tragedies of human nature, that people see the success of others as a threat rather than an example. This is not unique to the Jews, of course. The Chinese in Southeast Asia, the Lebanese in West Africa, the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, all have faced similar fates. These groups, much like the Jews, did not rely on government handouts or special privileges. They relied on work, on trade, on intellect. And when they rose to prominence, the hatred followed. Why? Because their success exposed the failures of others. And no one likes to be reminded that their own shortcomings are their own doing. Today, we see the same phenomenon in a different form. Antisemitism has not disappeared, it has simply adapted. The language has changed, but the resentment remains the same. The old accusations of controlling the economy have morphed into claims about privilege. The same people who say they oppose racism have no problem condemning an entire group for being too successful. And the irony is that the only way to avoid this hatred would be to stop succeeding. It's something no rational person should ever entertain. History does not deal in accidents. Jews have been hated in different places at different times for seemingly different reasons. But if you strip away the rhetoric, the pattern is clear. Economic niches lead to resentment. In medieval Europe, Jews were often barred from owning land, so they became financiers, moneylenders, and traders. This was not because they had some special love for finance, but because they had no other choice. And yet, when governments needed loans, they turned to Jewish bankers. When people needed credit, they turned to Jewish moneylenders. But when the debts became too high, when resentment festered, suddenly these same Jews were accused of exploitation and expelled. The pattern repeated across Europe for centuries. The same thing happened with the Chinese in Indonesia, the Indians in Uganda, and the Lebanese in Sierra Leone. In each case, a minority filled an economic gap, provided a valuable function, and eventually became resented for it. And in each case, expelling them led to economic collapse. You would think people would learn from history, but instead they repeat it. The Jews have been accused of controlling banks, industries, and media. But ask yourself this, if it were true, if these industries were really so tightly controlled, wouldn't the people complaining about it simply outperform them? If Jewish success were due to some conspiracy, then logically, any other group could copy that conspiracy and achieve the same results. But that's not what happens, because the real answer is much simpler. Discipline, education, and economic foresight lead to prosperity, and prosperity breeds resentment. In modern times, this resentment is fueled not just by economic envy, but by an entire political ideology that thrives on grievance and division. And nowhere is this clearer than on the political left. For decades, the left has promoted a worldview that portrays success as oppression and failure as victimhood. They have replaced the concept of self-improvement with the concept of grievance. Instead of looking at why some groups succeed, they focus on ways to justify why others fail. And rather than learning from successful groups like the Jews, they vilify them. Look at the rhetoric that is common today. We are told that disparities between groups are proof of discrimination.